Welcome back to America Decides. The House of Representatives moments ago passed the Laken Riley Act. This will expand federal authorities and powers to detain those undocumented immigrants suspected of any manner of crimes committed in this country. The vote was 263 to 156. We discussed this earlier with Scott McFarland. He suggested there might be some number of House Democrats to join on to this legislation. That number, in the end, 46 House Democrats voted in favor of the Laken Riley Act. This bill now heads to President Trump for his signature, which will be forthcoming in a matter of days and be the first piece of legislation signed in Trump 2.0. Meanwhile, Speaker Mike Johnson defending President Trump's broad grant of clemency to the January 6th rioters. We want to show you what Johnson said alongside what actually happened just over 4 years ago.
Everybody can describe this however they want. The president has the pardon and commutation authority. It's his decision, and I think what was made clear all along is that peaceful protests and people who engage in that should never be punished. There was a weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, Molly Ball and Shelby Talcott are here with me now at the table. Molly is senior political correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. Shelby, White House correspondent for Semafor. So, very quickly, Molly, the Laken Riley Act, there will be a signing ceremony at the White House. Senate Democrats did not allow this to come to the floor before the election. They did this time. They amended it slightly, but it's on its way to President Trump's desk.
Elections have consequences.
Indeed, they do.
And it's very clear. I mean, we reported today on a letter that many of the Democrats in the Senate sent to Republican leadership saying they want to continue to work together on immigration. There's a clear sense that Democrats have gotten the message from the electorate that they want something done on immigration. That being said, there's still quite a lot of unease within the Democratic caucus about how far to go, given that, you know, something like this started as a messaging bill and has a lot of provisions that Democrats remain uneasy with. So, and I think they're all waiting to see what the Trump administration does on the executive level with immigration, how far they go, and whether there's any kind of public backlash to it.
And Shelby, the administration is going quite a distance toward overhauling not only the application of immigration laws, but the very definition of what it means to seek asylum in this country, to arrive at our gates as a refugee or seeking refugee status, and the deployment of the U.S. military.
Yeah, and I think this is a situation where they're most certainly going to see legal pushback on a variety of these executive orders that we've seen drop in the last day and a half. But this is what Donald Trump campaigned on. He campaigned on the economy and on immigration. Those were his two top issues, and he made pretty clear what he was going to do on day one. And throughout the past few months, when I've talked to transition officials, they've made very clear that this has been their goal. And so I think particularly when it comes to immigration, this has been no secret that this is what Donald Trump wants to do. He's gone into office, and he's doing exactly what he said he was going to.
And Molly, just to put a legal button on this, it is the assumption of the Trump administration it will fight these legal battles, and it wants some of them to get to the Supreme Court because it believes it will get a favorable interpretation.
That's right, and we'll see. I mean, many of the
That's
things
their assumption. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but that's their initial assumption.
Or at the very least that they win politically from the fight, from, as Shelby said, appearing to be pushing as hard as possible to make good on those campaign promises to the fullest extent that they possibly can. Now, many of the things that Trump tried to do on immigration in his first term were stopped in the courts, and we don't see any let up in, you know, the willingness of outside organizations to bring lawsuits against these types of actions. So, you know, is the Supreme Court majority now more favorable to Donald Trump when it comes to something where there's a great deal of precedent, like, say, the attempt to overturn birthright citizenship? We'll have to see, because that is something on which the courts have been quite consistent for a very long time.
Shelby, also moves by the Trump administration to overhaul, if it can, certainly reimagine the size, scope of the federal workforce, specifically as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, they have signed an executive order getting rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they actually sent agency heads last night a letter saying, here's a sample of what you should be sending out to these people who have these jobs. We're getting rid of these jobs. And they've also initiated a warning saying if any of these agencies are trying to sort of get DEI to remain under a different name, you have to tell us. So there's a lot going on with that. But again, this is another thing that Donald Trump campaigned on. And I think, you know, in the past day and a half, what we've learned is what Donald Trump has campaigned on is what he is doing in the first few days of his administration. Everything he said he was going to do, pardon the January 6 rioters, get rid of DEI, try to shrink the scope of the government. He's trying to do all of that.
Molly, you wrote vividly, as you so often do, about the inauguration inside the Capitol Rotunda, the arrangement of billionaires, tech and otherwise, right next to the rostrum. And yet, there was an announcement at the White House yesterday about Stargate, supposedly $500 billion to be invested in data centers and the power required to fuel them, to move artificial intelligence development way forward in this country. Mere hours later, Elon Musk throws cold water all over that on X, saying they don't have the money, they don't have the resources, and that seems to me a kind of dividing line.
We're already seeing,
worth looking at.
Yeah, we're already seeing tensions break out over Elon Musk's role and exactly what it is he's empowered to do. If all he's doing is taking pot shots on social media and he's not, using governmental authority.
And raining on a presidential parade.
Sure, but he didn't have the power, for example, to stop that announcement from being made or to undo it in any material way that we have seen so far. He's expressing skepticism about it essentially as a private citizen. So as much as there are tensions, within the White House and in the larger Trump movement over the things Elon wants to do, and some suspicion about to what extent he may have vested interests at stake as well, given that he himself has an AI company. I think a lot is going to depend. And a long-standing
rivalry with Sam Altman, who was in the Roosevelt Room last evening.
Exactly, and with many of those other tech billionaires who were in the rotunda for the swearing in. So I think a lot is going to depend on what he can actually do versus what he's just out there popping off about.
And Shelby, this also factors in and filters through the Department of Government Efficiency, which is now within the Eisenhower Executive Office building, right across the street from the White House, occupying what used to be the U.S. Digital Services bureaucracy, which means it's actually a real thing. It's got an office, it's got staff, and it's going to be run entirely by Elon. Vivek Ramaswamy on the way out.
And this was really interesting because they were able to, this is how they were able to sort of do this by essentially taking this existing agency and just putting a new name on it. But what's really notable is we have a lot of questions that remain when it comes to DOGE because the executive order really focused on expanding and improving the technology of the government, whereas the initial mission of DOGE, of course, was to drastically save money and shrink the U.S. government. And then you have Elon Musk, who has a room in the White House, who has a building, an office space there, but he's not actually a White House official. And so there are a lot of questions that remain on how this is going to work and what exactly DOGE is going to ultimately be responsible for doing.
And what somebody like Elon Musk might learn about very extensive access to the inner workings of the federal technology apparatus.
Yes.
He could use that in all sorts of ways, maybe to help the U.S. taxpayer, maybe to help Elon Musk and his widespread industrial technological footprint.
Yep. And I will say a quick way, though, to get out of Donald Trump's favor is to do something like tweet about an initiative that Donald Trump has been touting and sort of pour cold water on it. And, who knows if Donald Trump will take that seriously. But generally, historically, that's not the smartest thing to do. But we'll see.
As that saying goes, watch this space. Shelby Talcott, Molly Ball, thanks so much as always.